these are the questions that you have asked us, and now we're going to answer them. I hope I didn't miss any. If I did, if we don't answer something, then shoot me a message and I'll just answer it personally. But yeah, so here we are. The first question that we were asked, or some of them are multiple questions and some of them are just questions that people have just asked us. So, what are the odds statistically that the embryos will take? Well, I looked it up, saw some stuff at one point, and back in 2013, the statistics were 40-ish% for frozen embryo transfers. But then our doctor, and when I went to our doctor to kind of get my testing done for our stuff, she said based on what the embryos are graded as and how healthy I am, that she said if we transfer one embryo, then she's going to give us like a 60% chance that we get a baby out of it. And if she said if we transfer two, then there's about a 70% chance. And she said the only reason I'm stopping at 70 is because I just, as a rule, I don't go over 70% because there's just so many factors that go into it. So
that's pretty exciting.
Basically, 100%.
From the doctor's
From the doctor. So, we are holding that extremely loosely. It's very encouraging to have that affirmation, but also we are not counting on that in any way, just because there are a lot of factors and it's totally under the control and sovereignty of God. And if this is within His plan, then it will have a kid or multiple kids. And if it's not within His plan, then we won't. So, statistics are great. They're encouraging, but we're not putting a ton of stock in that.
Yep. I'll read the next one. Okay. How about that? How do you feel about the possibilities of having multiples when transferring more than one embryo? 2 thumbs up. Get it? Because we're transferring 2 embryos. Yeah, we're really excited about it. You know, Ellen actually wants to transfer 2 more than 1, and
we want to transfer 2 more.
But you came up with it first.
I did.
Okay, because she thought about all this stuff a lot more than I did, a lot earlier.
But it's not me pushing it.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, okay.
So we think it's really cool that, you know, if we have 2 kids from these 2 embryos,
twins, like one pregnancy,
right? Then they can each have a little buddy growing up, so they can have someone who shares that adoption story, and so they don't have to feel
genetics.
Isolated and genetically related, so that, you know, it's not that like as one isolated kid different from us, like they have a friend. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, we're hoping and
we're praying for that, as a matter of fact.
How many will we transfer? Well, we're adopting 4, and we're going to transfer 2 each time. That could change depending on, like, if they thaw the embryos and figure out that any of them didn't survive the freezing process. They don't know that until they actually thaw them. And so if we get to transfer day and they say, oh, well, you know, 1 of them or 2 of them didn't survive, then that could change. But our plan right now is to transfer 2 at a time.
All right. Will you experience all the woes of pregnancy? What about breastfeeding? I probably won't experience a lot of the woes of pregnancy. I've heard that it's pretty much impossible for me to...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. He's not sorry.
That was a good question. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It is a typical pregnancy. So, in addition to risks on, okay, are they going to implant? Are they not going to implant? Because they transfer the embryos, and then there's no guarantee that they implant. So it's just like a regular pregnancy where, you know, the baby might not implant. You could be pregnant for 2 or 3 weeks and then miscarry. I read a lot of stories. There's a book called Souls on Ice, and it's published by Embryo Adoption Services of Cedar Park, I think. And so I read that book when we were kind of doing our research. And in the book, it was like a compilation of all these different people's stories from the adopter side and the donor side. And there were at least a couple, maybe several stories about people who did embryo adoption, and they got a few weeks in, they were pregnant, and then all of a sudden they start bleeding, so they rush to the hospital, and then they're like, oh no, there's a baby's heartbeat. And so the doctor says, well, you know, there's a chance like that you probably were carrying twins and you're miscarrying one of the twins. So yes, pregnancy is just totally typical. It's all the traditional risks and all the traditional benefits. That's one of the, I think, pluses of embryo adoption, is that you get to experience a traditional pregnancy, and that you get to control the environment, and you get to bond, and the baby gets to hear both voices.
Yep.
And you birth the baby, and you get to bond with feeding and just that kind of stuff. So yes, all that is normal, as normal as a normal pregnancy.
Yep.
So.
And there's going to be like hormones and stuff that Ellen takes to prepare her body, so that basically we're going to trick her body into thinking that she's naturally pregnant, and that'll give her the best chance of having the embryos implant, and then from there it's basically a natural pregnancy.
Yeah. So we start the hormones like right before the transfer, and then continue them, I think, until like week 6. And then the doctor weans me off of it, and then she releases us to like a regular OBGYN. So this is actually a question that have gotten a lot, like just kind of general like matching process. So I was like, how do you get chosen? When will you get to see the people to choose from? How many people will see your profile? So when you match, at least with Nightlight, I think maybe other people are different, like National Embryo Donation Center, that one's in Tennessee. I think they have a book. Like, I think they have like a database, because they have all of their embryos like on site in Tennessee. And I think you do kind of have more control, like you just kind of look through a book. I'm not 100% sure. I never actually talked to them, but from looking on their website, that's kind of what I got from that. With Nightlight, it was just like a traditional domestic adoption, where we created a profile that was just kind of a biography about us. We wrote a letter specifically to that, dear genetic family, and here's a little bit about us. And then we wrote like a 10 or 15 page little book, which ours ended up being kind of long. We used more pictures and stuff, but
lots of pictures of Gus.
Clearly. And so what happened was we created a profile, and then we sent it to Nightlight, and then they actually pick some people who kind of match with us in like lifestyle and like religion, and I think that was one thing we could choose in like how many embryos did they have available and how many did we want. And then they actually picked a couple and said, okay, I bet that they would like Tim and Ellen. And so they presented our profile to that couple. And so one couple at a time gets to see our profile. And then they say yes or no. And then if they say no, we actually never know that they said no to us.
Yep, never know.
So if they say yes, then the matching people send us their profile, the genetic family's profile, and say, they've chosen you. Do you feel comfortable with them? So then we would get to look. So it's not here they just, send a blanket email to all the genetic families out there. And we actually never got to look through and like choose.
Yeah.
So we were presented with, okay, here's one family who's already said yes to you, that they would like to give you their embryos. And then if you say yes, we move forward. If you say no, then they're completely off the table. You can never go back to them. So we were fortunate enough that we were able to say yes to the first couple.
Yeah.
So.
And they do that, like Ellen said, just to make sure that, we don't know that people are looking at our profile, right? Because if we knew that somebody was looking at our profile, then we'd be like, are they going to say yes? Are they going to pick us? So that way, all that stuff happens behind.
That would be so demoralizing to be like, oh, 5 people have said no. However, we did in our webinars, they did talk about like, building your family profile, and like, this is what you should do, and this is probably what you shouldn't do. And they talked about like after a few months, if you haven't gotten chosen, then okay, maybe we'll revisit your profile and maybe say this a different way. Like this sentence could come across as, you know, XYZ. You know, maybe talk about yourselves in a different way. Like don't sound really braggy or whatever. So I forgot where I was going with that. But there you go.
There you go. There is some information for you. There you are.
Yeah. It'll probably come to me in just a second. All right. Would you like to read the next question?
Sure. Next question is, are the embryos PGS tested, and can you have them tested? And so we looked that up, and that is like genetic screening before implanting. So before you stick the embryos in, you can have them tested genetically. You know, they can take a cell from the embryo and screen it for whatever, like aneuploidy, trisomy 21, stuff like that. You know, science stuff. It's, you know, science stuff. We do not believe that our embryos have been screened, and we're probably not going to have them screened. I don't know what the...
No one has offered that to us, and it doesn't really matter to us.
Yeah, and I don't... To me, I wouldn't want to risk anything happening to the embryos. I don't know exactly how prevalent that is, if you screen them, you know, if that affects the embryos at all, like there's correlation with anything. But it's really just not worth testing for us at this point.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. Are we worried they aren't the best quality? No, because I know the grades and they are excellent quality.
Yeah.
Every single embryo gets graded, I believe, after they're frozen. And then all of ours, like I don't actually know all of the scales, like how far it goes. Some of them are numbers and some of them are letters. Ours were letters, and they were all like, ours had 2 grades. One was the actual baby human cells and one was the placenta cells. And all of our embryos were B's and A's, like mixes of B's and A's. Like I think we had 2 ABs and like 2 BBs. And so that's excellent. Like that's fantastic. And then actually my words in the doctor's office were, wow, that's stinking good. And she said, yep, they are. So, and then they thaw the embryos the day of the transfer. So they start thawing them at like 8 o'clock, and then the transfer is normally at noon. And so they regrade them after they thaw them, and then they call us and say, hey, you know, this one's not looking too great. What do you want to do? Do you want to thaw another one? And no matter what happens, our answer is going to be, nope, whatever you thawed, we're transferring.
No.
Because part of the reason that we are passionate about embryo adoption is because we believe that every embryo is a life. And so I think there's a risk if you try to refreeze, you could damage them and it could be even worse. And then also we couldn't bring ourselves to discard them because that's destroying a life. So they're graded when they're frozen. They'll be regraded when they're thawed, and then whatever we get is what we get. But they look great now, and then that's part of the reason why our doctor gave us a 60 and 70% chance of getting at least one baby out of this. Was just the mix of their grade and then me being healthy.
Yeah, and another thing about the grading system is that there's no guarantee that the grading system is going to correlate with anything that happens afterwards, because our doctor has said that she's seen perfect embryos, highest grade embryos don't implant, and then really low grade embryos implant and develop and turn into a perfectly healthy baby. So, I mean, yes, we can grade them based on just looking at the cells and stuff, but it doesn't really say the whole story. So, and that's why, absolutely, whatever gets thawed, we're going to transfer both of them, because they don't know, God knows.
Right.
And so we're going to give every embryo the best possible chance, and that's going ahead and transferring it. So that's, quality is kind of a thing, but it's kind of not a thing.
And I mean, further on that, like, how many stories have you heard where doctors have given moms who are pregnant, like, your baby is probably going to die, and they're going to live for like 15 minutes, or, you know, you're going to have, you know, risk your life or whatever. And then God brings a healthy baby into the world and the mom is fine too. So it's just like, we're trusting the Lord in this, and just whatever he has is what he's got for us. So, yep.
Last question. Can the genetic family get them back? And the answer to that is ultimately yes, but it's not a done deal. So the way it works is we are receiving the embryos actually on Wednesday, and that is in like 3 days. So we were super excited about that.
I'm not nervous at all.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. If we don't transfer the embryos within a year, right? If we just kind of dilly-dally around and just, then the placing family has the option of getting the embryos back, requesting them back. That's not an automatic, they get them back after a year, but it's an option. And then let's say we transfer in January, okay? That's what we're shooting for, January, February. If after that transfer, we don't transfer the other embryos within 5 years, then once again, the placing family can request them back.
But it's not an automatic, because it's like our social worker told us, with the year thing, it's not a given. It's like they had an episode, an incident where the family just didn't transfer them for a year. And it was like, okay, the point of this is to give each embryo a chance at life. And so, like, there was either they didn't communicate why, or like there wasn't really a reason why they weren't transferring. So it's like, okay, you adopt these embryos and then somebody loses their job. Like, I think most genetic families are going to be like, you know what, that's fine. Like, if you need to do that, but it's just about communication. And then again, with the 5-year thing, like, the thing that I kind of worry about with that is like, okay, so what if we do this embryo transfer? We have a baby, or we have twins, and then we get naturally pregnant in 2 or 3 years. Then will we be ready to try for twins again in 2 years? So it's like, and just based on what I know about the genetic family, like, I don't think that they're going to ask for their embryos back if in good faith. If we're like, hey, we had a baby, or we had twins, and I'm just not, we can't do that right, again, whatever. No. Then we have every intention of using all 4 of them. And so it's not like we're just going to indefinitely freeze them. So.
Yeah. So the rules are there just to make sure that
they want the embryos to have life.
Yeah. So that people don't just adopt the embryos and hold on to them forever, right? So that there's things set in place to make sure that if they're not used, then the genetic family can ask for them back and then adopt them to a different family. So
yeah. So those were your questions. And if you have more, let us know. And like I said, I'll try to answer them individually. There you go.
So 3 days. Hopefully our embryos will be with us in our state.
Yes, in our state. In
our state, and not halfway across the country. That's the next step, and we are kind of excited about it, I'd say.
A little bit. I've already had 2 nightmares about our transfer, so that's a thing. Yeah. It's pretty exciting last night.
Indeed.
Pretty exciting transfer dream.
So thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed it.
Bye.
See ya.